Shenanigans of a Spider-Enhanced Teen by TsunTsunBaby. Shocked Pikachu meme. 5 times Peter left the Rogue Avengers shocked speechless, plus 1 time they, somewhat, got over it. 1. Having the Rogue Avengers pardoned and back at the compound was rough at the beginning. Still rough if Tony was being completely honest. There had been a lot of trust thrown away during what the public called the superhero Civil War. So there was a lot to fix if the Avengers ever wanted to get anywhere near what they had before. And it was a slow process, but it was a process nonetheless. Tony congratulated himself on the daily for becoming so used to the rogues that he rarely had to hide the urge to flinch whenever one of them came towards him or raised their voices. Especially when at the start of this re-cohabitation he could barely stand to be in the same room without fear of a panic attack. So, things were slow, but getting better. That didn't mean that Tony's fight-or-flight response didn't activate when he saw all the rogues gathered and whispering in the common room. Even before the Civil War, something like that would have put him on edge. Clearing his throat, Tony stepped further into the room, eyeing everyone wearily. His suspicion spiked when Steve jumped at the noise. But Tony didn't get time to worry that the man's advanced hearing missed him when a flash of red and gold caught his eye. Looking over Steve's shoulder, Tony had no idea how he missed it when he first walked in. Because behind the rogues, covering a giant section of the common room wall, was a mural of the Iron Man armor made into sticky notes. Tony gaped, shocked into silence. We asked Friday, but she said that you didn't have it put up and she wouldn't tell us who did. The sound of Steve's voice knocked Tony out of his stupor. Ignoring the man, Tony walked up to the mural. Oh, Tony knew exactly who would do something like this. Quickly taking a picture, he dialed the supposed culprit. Mr. Stark? Kid, just how long did it take for you to do this? Tony kicked himself mentally for how monotone his voice was when when nervous laughter came through the phone's speakers. Like 4-ish hours, I think. It probably would have taken less, but I kept getting distracted, and there was one point where I thought I wouldn't have enough sticky notes, especially since gold sticky notes aren't exactly a thing, and I had to colour yellow ones with gold Sharpie, which was another thing I thought I was going to run out of, even though Friday told me I had more than enough. Peter's rambling broke off into a soft whisper. You're not mad, right, Mr. Stark? The sad, unsure tone of Peter's voice snapped Tony right back into present time. God, no. No, I'm not mad. This is amazing, kid. In 4 hours? Really? This shit looks like it would have taken so much longer, especially with how accurate it looks. Tony didn't attempt to hide the pride in his voice, even as he steadily ignored the curious stares from the others. In fact, if I got a big enough frame, how would you feel about transferring it so it's less likely to fall apart? Something fell on the other end as Peter started spluttering. You don't have to do that, Mr. Stark. Really, it's fine. They're just sticky notes, so it could just be taken down. Tony scoffed. All that time and hard work just to tear it to shreds? I think not, Peaty Pie, unless that's what you really want. But if you want to keep it, then we're damn well keeping it. The stares got heavier, heating the side of Tony's body, but he kept his focus on the boy on the other end of the call. If it's not too much trouble, came the quiet reply. A smile spread across Tony's face. Friday, could you order some materials for me? Looks like I got a frame to make. Friday's horse boss sounded over the common room speakers, the same time Peter's excited, Mate, can I help? Came from Tony's phone. Laughing, Tony answered, It's just a frame, but sure, kid. See when you have the time and come over. Sweet, I'll ask Aunt May. Bye, Mr. Stark. Yeah, talk to you later, kid. Ending the call, Tony rounded on the rogues and pointed a finger at them, warning them. If any of you even so much as breathe on that mural, I'll personally make sure your next 2 months here at the compound are hell on earth. Satisfied with the level of shock and weariness on everyone's faces, Tony left. 1 week later would find him and Peter in a sanctioned-off common room carefully moving sticky notes to the backboard of a sleek black metal frame. 2. The first time the rogues met Peter is a couple months after the sticky note mural incident. With the amount of times Tony had walked out rooms and meetings muttering idiot teens and smart-ass interns, had the rogues' curiosity at an all-time high. To say the first meeting was interesting would be an understatement. In fact, they didn't even realize they were face to face with this infamous Peter at first. To be fair, it had been right after a fight with some stubborn blob monsters, and all the Avengers had wanted to do was shower before collapsing onto the nearest horizontal surface. Being immediately faced with a shocked-looking teen and a horde of Roombas in the common room had not been part of the plan. Still high of adrenaline, the rogues braced themselves for another fight until Tony pushed in front of them all suitless. What the hell? Teen just pointed at Tony and said, "In my defense, I was left unsupervised." Everything was silent until Tony gave a defeated sigh. "All right." The mechanic gestured towards the small robots. "Hit me. What are their names?" Teen visibly brightened before dragging Tony over to where the Roombas had gathered in a neat semicircle. Pointing to each one, the teen meticulously and excitably named off each of the robots. First is Robo. She got the name because every time something with Robocop showed up, she got excited. Next to her is Beep. The small robot gave a high-pitched beep. He's very talkative. Next is Coco because he refuses to clean anything that isn't cocoa or chocolate-based. After him is Curtsy. She likes to play hide-and-seek. Leaning in close, the boy whispered in Tony's ear, "Her favourite hiding place is behind the curtains, but the longer it takes for someone to find her, the happier she is." Leaning back, he bounced on the balls of his feet excitedly while waving toward the last Roomba. Last but not least is Count Succula. He's extremely nocturnal. The rogues watched as Tony nodded throughout the entire explanation, before crouching down and introducing himself. "Hey little guys, my name is Tony, but I get the feeling you know that already, don't you?" Multiple beeps answered him. "Good, good. Does that mean you also know that all of you are going to have to stay in the common room?" Another series of beeps answered him. "Awesome. Otherwise have fun. Don't forget to recharge every now and then." Tony gave each of the Roombas a pat before standing. Steve figured this was a good time to interrupt. Clearing his throat, he waited for both Tony and the teen to turn towards him. Waving towards the teen, his voice was confused as he asked, "Tony, this is—" Watching Tony smirk and pull the teen closer via an arm around the shoulders left the rogues shocked at how natural it looked. "Everyone, this is my intern Peter." 3. The second meeting was just as short as the first, but this time it was with only Steve in the communal kitchen at 6:04 a.m. The teen, Peter, Steve had to remind himself, came sliding into the kitchen in a hurry, mumbling, I'm late, I'm so late," under his breath, while wearing a backpack. The young brunette was opening and closing cupboards at a quick pace before Friday's calm voice directed him. "Two doors to your right, mini-boss." Mini-boss? Hearing a quick thanks and then nothing, Steve looks up from where he was standing with the beginnings of breakfast preparation. He saw the young boy frozen. Do you need help with something?" That seemed to bring Peter back. "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just not used to people being up this early." Peter gave a sheepish smile. "But if you'll excuse me, I need to get into the cupboard in front of you, Mr. Rogers." "Just Steve is fine," he said while moving to the side. Peter was quick to open the cupboard and snatch an entire box of granola bars off the top shelf. Steve watched the boy as he ripped open one of the bars before throwing a quick thanks over his shoulder and running out of the kitchen, not giving Steve a chance to respond. Silently, Steve wondered if all his interactions with the boy were going to leave him feeling like he's got whiplash. 4. Out of the corner of his eye, Tony saw the Rogue Avengers enter the common room. But on the premise of his staring a smug-looking Peter down, he ignored their presence altogether. "You have 5 seconds." Peter's face dropped into confusion. 1. The rogues watched the teen take a step back. 2. A sharp intake of breath was heard as Peter took a couple more steps backwards, almost bumping into the coffee table behind him. 5. Peter gave a squeal as he turned and ran off through the west wing door, Pony hot on his heels. The room was draped in silence as the receding footsteps faded, leaving the Rogue Avengers to stare at the silly string-covered room in shock. 5. Peter walked into the compound's common room, only to immediately try and retreat when he saw the annoyed looks on the Rogue Avengers' faces. His attempt was thwarted when the Winter Soldier, Bucky, Peter thought. Bucky, Bucky, Bucky. I really should be able to remember that, damn it. Caught sight of him, and subsequently so did Steve Rogers. Hi? While he still held some hero worship for the people sitting in the room, the way their presence had a way of making his mentor extremely uncomfortable makes him cautious. It was the Falcon. His name is Sam. Get it together, Peter. He broke the heavy tension in the room. You wouldn't happen to know any good ideas on how to get Tony out of the lab for a meal, would you? Peter shifted where he stood, uncomfortable with so many eyes watching him. Why? This time it was Steve who answered. He never joins us for team dinners, and we never see him in the kitchen. The super soldier shrugged. We have no idea when, where, or how often he's eating. Uh-huh, Peter said while nodding. Well, I don't know what to tell you. My plan only works because it's me. The confused looks, Peter sighed. Friday. How can I help, mini-boss? Various shocked sounds came from the rogues. When's the last time Mr. Stark ate? 7 hours and 43 minutes ago. Nodding, Peter held a hand up when it looked like the rogues were about to say something. Could you call Mr. Stark for me? Friday's voice was cheerful as she replied. Of course, mini-boss. Ah, the joys of conspiring AIs. The silence that had fell at Peter's prompting was broken by Tony's voice coming from Friday's speakers. What's up, Pete? Get lost on your way down? Peter felt himself smile at his mentor's teasing tone. Nah, I'm just hungry, and there's not a whole lot here that doesn't have to be prepared and cooked. I was wondering if we could get something. Yeah, I really need to restock. The sounds of tools being put away were crystal clear from the speakers. But sure, we can get something to eat. I need a break anyway. You just got here, but how do you feel about going to some new Italian restaurant that opened? Peter bit his lip to keep from laughing. Sounds fine to me. All right, garage in 5, came Tony's warm voice. Okay. The shell-shocked look on all the rogues' faces had Peter smiling for the rest of the night. And when questioned by Tony, because he knew that there was enough food, the only thing Peter said was that he needed to affirm his position as Tony's #1 favourite. A hand carding through his hair, and Tony saying that he'd always be his favourite, had Peter smiling for the next week. +1. Tony was not happy. Trademark. By the time he had had time to work on something other than SI and Accord paperwork, he'd run out of coffee in the workshop. And what was more a minor annoyance became irrevocably irritating when he was dragged from the communal kitchen's coffee machine and into the common room for team movie night and dinner. All he wanted to do was relax and prepare for when Peter arrived. He only got so much time to spend with the kid between their schedules, and he wanted to make the best of it, damn it. Tony was actually trying to be nice to the rogues. While he was still fairly uncomfortable around them, they had come far, so he put up with being dragged along with minimal fuss. His only stipulation being that whatever they ordered, they had better double it. He got a few confused looks, but they ordered twice as much food easily enough. Because God only knows when's the last time Peter actually ate. The boy's stomach was a black hole worse than both super soldiers, and Tony would be damned if the spiderling didn't get enough. Settling down in one of the love seats alone, Tony texted Peter. Everyone just ordered Thai, so I had them order extra in case you want some. Yeah, thanks. Let me just finish my homework and I'll swing by. I could send Happy. No, swinging is fine. It's faster anyway. Peter. Okay, so I may have drank too many energy drinks. We thought they wouldn't affect me because of my metabolism and everything, but they suddenly hit and now I'm all jittery, and swinging to the compound might help me calm down. Pony sighed once he read the stream of texts. Just be careful, and we're checking how much caffeine is too much the next time we have a chance. Okay. A paragraph worth of emojis followed Peter's last text, and Tony just sat back, preparing himself for what was most likely going to be an overcharged mutant teen coming through those doors soon enough. And damn if Tony didn't call it. It only took about 15 minutes after the food had arrived for the West Wing doors to slide open and for Tony to suddenly have a hypergenius pressed against his side in the love seat. The water dripping from Peter's curls and onto Tony's shirt was a giveaway that the teen had showered before coming to eat. The almost constant bouncing the teen was doing also told on how much swinging to the compound didn't help him calm down. Rapid fire, food, 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 coming from Peter's mouth, solidified that he was still hyped on what was probably an unholy amount of caffeine and sugar. Tony dragged half of the Thai food closer with difficulty, as the teen refused to let go of him. Jesus, Peter. Tony laughed even as he silently messaged Friday to scan the boy. While it didn't look like anything was wrong beyond the extra energy, he wanted to make sure. Friday's results saying nothing was out of the norm made him relax. What happened to calming down on your way here? Teen only shrugged, cheeks puffing with food. Sighing in both exasperation and fondness, Tony tossed some napkins onto Peter's lap. Slow down, kid. No one's going to take your food. Tony felt Peter freeze from where he was, still pressed flush against the engineer's side. He watched the teen swallow before glaring at the rogues. If any of you touch my food, I'll make you eat your hands. Choking on the mouthful of noodles Tony had just taken, he laughed at the rogues' shocked faces. The shock quickly turned in concern as they watched the teen pack away box after box of takeout. Tony? The man in question turned and looked at Steve. Yeah? The super soldier cleared his throat. Is it okay for Peter to be eating that much? He ate even more than I did. Tony just waved off the man's concern. It's fine. Both me and Friday checked, and he's in no danger from eating the amount he does. At Steve's unconvinced face, Tony continued. Besides, he said as he pinched the teen's side, earning a yelp, he's as skinny as a twig. The indignant noise Peter had made had Tony laughing. Dad, I'm perfectly fine, fighting fit, Peter whined. The air in the common room seemed to freeze once what Peter had said sunk in. Tony just bit his lip to stop from laughing. The look on the rogues' faces was priceless. He'd have to ask Friday to save a photo of it. Besides, this isn't the first time Peter has called him Dad. He's been calling Tony that off and on, but much more consistently lately, for the last few months. It's just that he's never said it around the rogues. The rogues who think he's only an intern, even if they don't understand why an intern would come all the way to the compound when Stark Tower was still running. And God, if being petty didn't fill Tony with immense joy. Keeping the tower and renaming it back to Stark was worth the pinched look on Steve's face the first day everyone was pardoned. It took Peter looking up from where he was scrolling through the movie library and asking, Did I say something? For the silence to break. Dad? Spiders need love too. So maybe it's a good thing that Peter has never really been scared of spiders. He had even found them really cool when he was younger. It's a fascination that grew exponentially after he was bit. He probably would have asked Aunt May for a pet tarantula by now, if it wasn't for the fact that she was terrified by even the smallest of spiders. Therefore, pet spiders were a no-go, even if the apartment they lived in allowed pets. But the reason Peter was glad that he wasn't afraid of spiders was because he probably would have died by now if he was. Apparently, the bite that mutated his genes didn't just give him spider-like abilities, it also made him extremely likable to all other spiders. It didn't matter the species or how aggressive it was supposed to be, they all loved to climb on top of him and just hang out. Peter had walked around a pet store for 30 minutes, unknowingly, with an escaped tarantula on the back of his shoulder, He only noticed when one of the employees started screaming, terrified to death of the baby pink toed tarantula clinging to him, and other employees came running to see what's wrong. The employee who found the small baby was very calm while explaining to Peter what was on him, not knowing that he really didn't mind. He smiled and agreed to let Peter give the spider a few pats, cawing at the tiny pinkish-orange dots at the end of each leg, before taking the spider back to where he belonged. Multiple variations of this event took place before Peter just stopped going to pet stores altogether. It didn't stop the random spider he met in alleyways from coming to crawl all over him, though. He kind of wished that there was some form of treat he could carry around, but he couldn't exactly carry live insects with him all the time. Plus, the chance of him losing them was ridiculously high. So, Peter just settled for giving them a few strokes and carrying them somewhere new where there'd be more food. Peter also never told anyone about spiders having a sudden affinity for him, since he knew a lot of people were afraid of them, or, at the very least, grossed out. The only person who truly knew was Mr. Stark, Tony's dad, and that's because he's the only one who knew his identity beyond Aunt May and Ned. Because, see, Peter didn't actually tell Mr. Stark's dad. And did Peter mention he was still getting used to calling him dad? Because wow, had that been the emotionally charged conversation of the year. The man himself had figured it out with the help of giant skittish spiders running around the streets of Brooklyn. They were fast and hard to catch, which is why Spider-Man had been called on. It had been resolved easily once Peter dropped down where they had been most recently spotted, flicking his tongue softly at them. The horrified and slightly disgusted faces of the rogues, minus the Winter Soldier, who looked slightly fascinated, as Peter came back out of the alley with a spider on his back, legs wrapped around all the way across his torso, and 3 more following close behind, was further evidence as to why Peter never tells anyone he's basically a spider whisperer now. Peter really didn't care about the rogues' reaction that much, though. He filed it away because it could come in handy later on. He was worried about his dad's reaction. Peter didn't even know if the man liked spiders. Seeing the Iron Man armor helmet retract to show Tony smirking calmed him down some. Hearing Tony say, "So I see you made some new friends," relaxed Peter even further. So he ignored the gagging sounds coming from behind the Iron Man armor and picked up the spider that was nervously walking circles in front of Peter's feet. He smiled as he held the fuzzy creature up. I guess you could say that. A few weeks later, there was a giant stuffed spider sitting on Peter's bed at the compound. "Hey, Dad," the man in question hummed from where he was working on an SI project. "What's your take on spiders?" Peter watched Tony freeze from where he's sitting across the table to him. The man gave him a confused look as he set his tools aside. "I don't really have an opinion on them. I don't dislike them, but they also aren't my favourite animal. Why do you ask, kid?" Shrugging, Peter fiddled with a spare piece of metal absent-mindedly, avoiding eye contact. "It's just, I don't know," he started. "I've always liked them, but it always seems like most people don't like them, or even outright fear them. Ned doesn't mind talking or reading about them. Pictures or seeing them in real life freaks him out. And Aunt May can't stand the thought of them. So I guess—" Peter risked a glance at his dad's face, relieved to see the openness, before looking away and continuing. "I guess it would just be nice to have someone I can actually talk to about my new spider whisperer power is all." Peter jumped when a hand touched his, relaxing as a calloused thumb rubbed soothingly across the back of his hand. "Oh, Peter, look at me, kid." Shyly looking up, Peter met warm brown eyes. "I really wouldn't mind being that person. I have absolutely zero problems with spiders. Besides," his eyes turned mischievous as Tony smirked, "you being the new Spider King isn't anywhere near the strangest thing I've seen." Letting out the breath he didn't know he was holding, Peter immediately rounded the table and pulled out his phone. He smiled the entire time he showed his dad the pictures of the different spiders he's met, where, and their different personalities. When Peter walked into the compound to welcome Tony home from a business trip, only to have a small box shoved into his hands, well, he was thoroughly confused. "Hold this and don't open it unless absolutely necessary or I tell you to. Give me 1 hour." And with that, the engineer took off in the direction of his workshop, leaving Peter stunned. Feeling something in the box move had Peter shivering. Looking down, he could only gape at the grey and purple fuzzy leg that was sticking out of a hole in the top of the box. Holy shit. The next hour saw him petting the long legs that would randomly pop out and muttering softly to the trapped spider. The rumbling in his chest was new, but seemed to calm the other down, so Peter didn't fight it. Are you purring? Peter jumped, his sticky fingers saving the poor spider on his lap from going flying. Whipping around, he came face to face with the curious-looking Tony. Hesitantly he said, I don't know. The curiosity on the other man's face got stronger before being replaced with determination. We're going to look into that some other time. Right now I need some help doing a bit of heavy lifting. Tony pointed at the box still held in Peter's grasp. And bring the fuzz machine with you. Following along brought Peter to the workshop and in front of what was easily a 50-gallon tank. It probably would have been easier to just buy a tank, but it was faster to just build one with all the stuff I had, especially since it was already mostly done and all I really had to do was put the pieces together. Peter could only stare at his mentor, his father figure, stunned. Pony carried on as normal. I figured since we're heroes and prone to breaking things, this would also be safer. It's made from Hulk-proof glass and has a black adamantium frame, so the thing is basically indestructible. The adamantium also makes it heavy as hell, which is why I need you to help carry it. Looking over the tank and hearing how difficult it probably was to make, caused Peter to unintentionally tear up. It didn't go unnoticed either. Oh shit, kid, what's going on? Fingers brushing against his cheek caused Peter to let out a sob. Quickly putting the box spider he was still holding on top of the closed tank, he wrapped his arms around Tony. Thank you, thank you, thank you, he sobbed. A wet patch was forming on the dress shirt underneath his face. The arms that circled around Peter's waist stopped him from moving away. They stood there, minutes passing, while Peter clutched his father figure, sobs slowly weakening into hiccups. The hands gently carded through his hair. Hey, Peter, you feel any better? He thought about it before shrugging. He felt emotionally drained. Does that count as better? It's fine if you don't know. Do you feel like talking? Peter shook his head from its place on Tony's shoulder. Okay, you don't have to. How about moving that tank up to your room? Do you feel up to that? He could feel himself stiffen even with the hand still running soothingly through his hair. Did he? The thought of it didn't make him want to cringe, so he probably could. But does that mean his dad could stay here? Or go with him? He didn't want to let go so soon. No, no, no. Peter whined, hoping to convey what he was thinking, but without words. I'll be with you the entire time, Pete. We'll set it up together. He thought about it for a few seconds before nodding, but not moving. You're going to have to unstick then, kid. At least until we get everything situated. Smiling sheepishly, Peter unstuck his hands from the back of his mentor's shirt, watching the man pick up his discarded suit jacket and throw it over the box Peter's spider was in. Peter's face must have shown his confusion, because when Tony looked at him, he only shrugged. I think it's pheromones. I'm pretty sure this is the jacket you stole the one day you had a nightmare during midday nap. And I was in some board meeting at the tower. Remember that? He must have took Peter's flushed face as the signal that he did in fact remember that day, and continued. Well, I kind of just threw it back in my closet. It's not like it got dirty, but it's probably a good thing I packed it for the trip, because it was the only thing that kept the Purple Menace calm during the trip back. Pony waved a hand in the air. So, pheromones. Peter thought about it as he reached for the tank. Yeah, that made a lot of sense, actually. Picking the tank up, he started making his way to his room, occasionally checking behind him to make sure that Tony was still there. He ignored the Rogue Avengers as he crossed the common room and passed through the west wing doors. Opening his bedroom door had him almost tripping over a box. Careful, I didn't get a chance to move stuff out of the way before the trip. Nodding, Peter gently nudged a few boxes out of his way before spotting a table in his room that wasn't there before. A quick look over showed it was the perfect size to hold the tank he was carrying. Peter could feel a lump in his throat forming even as he placed the tank in its designated spot. He heard Tony sit on the bed behind him and a box being opened. It's probably best if we get Fuzzy Plum into his new home, huh? How about a movie after that? Turning, Peter saw the box on Tony's lap held terrarium supplies. The lump in his throat got bigger. Pushing it down, he got to work by helping open the other boxes. It was about an hour and a half before Peter was satisfied with the result. Coconut fibres lined the bottom of the enclosure, half of it damp, with plenty of plants and structures to be used for hiding or climbing. After a quick search online, Peter placed the water dish on the opposite end, away from the major hiding spots, in a little dugout so it wouldn't spill. The thermometer was attached to the back wall where he could easily see it. Overall, Peter was proud of his little setup. He heard Tony come stand next to him. Guess it's time for the move-in. Peter looked between the box in Tony's hands and the man's face before slowly opening the taped-down lid. Immediately, fuzzy legs attached to Peter's arm, and he laughed. Okay, you're fine. I'm just going to put you in your new home, all right? His voice was raspy from lack of use in his previous crying. He didn't let that bother him. Making a few clicks with his tongue, he softly placed the fuzzy tarantula into the habitat, close to one of the hiding spots. You're okay, you're safe. Once the arachnid was safely hiding, Peter pulled his hand out and closed the enclosure's lid securely to let the poor guy get used to his new home on his own time. Promptly falling onto his bed, Peter rolled until his head rested on his mentor's lap. Thank you. Fingers lightly pulled at his curls before gently untangling the knots in his hair. He felt the shrug Tony gave from where his face was pressed into the man's stomach. I had already planned on all this a while back, hence the almost finished enclosure. I just didn't expect to get the actual pet part until everything was set up. We were driving to the airport when we went by a specialty pet store in London, which is when impulse took over, I guess. He liked me best, probably because of my jacket, which is how I chose which one. Dragging his father figure down fully onto the bed, Peter wiggled until he could wrap himself fully around the man. His voice was wet as he whispers, I love it. Thank you so much. I've always wanted a pet tarantula. Fingers went back to stroking his hair as the lights dimmed. I figured as much, but I also knew Aunt May would have never allowed it, not if what you said was true about how terrified of spiders she is. Peter just hummed, emotionally drained and exhausted, eyes closing as he listened to the steady beat of Tony's heart. Go to sleep, kid. I'll be here when you wake up. The last thing Peter heard was for Friday to put on a movie. Okay, so hypothetically speaking, if I were to release a bunch of spiders in the compound now, only in the communal areas and or the rogues' bedrooms, I may have nothing against spiders, but I draw the line at them crawling on me while I sleep. Technically, Peter points his pencil at the engineer, sleeping humans absolutely terrify spiders. Breathing, heartbeats, and snoring all scare them away because of the vibrations. Tony just points his wench back at the teen. Technically, most people don't live with a human with natural spider appeal rolling off them in waves. If anything, there's enough of your pheromones on all my stuff that any spiders in my room would disregard common sense altogether. Frowning at his mentor, Peter begrudgingly agreed. Yeah, that would happen, wouldn't it? Nodding, Tony got back to replacing Butterfingers' treads, the bot beeping happily whenever he's given something to hold. Yeah, it would. But go on, you've intrigued me now. Okay, so, Peter began, I've been running tests around the compound with fake, highly realistic spiders to see everyone's reaction. He dug a piece of paper out from in between the sheets of homework that were surrounding him. Mr. Wilson has the worst reaction. He immediately leaves any room if anyone so what mentions that a spider was seen in the last 10 minutes. He also refuses to re-enter it unless someone makes sure there's no spider. Snort came from Tony. Mr. Barton has probably the funniest reaction. If the spider is far enough away, he has minimal reaction to seeing it. When it gets close enough, though, or even touches him, he screams before running away. Oh God, Tony guffawed. Please tell me there's video. Peter nodded as Friday happily says, Save for your viewing pleasure, boss. Peter skimmed his research results. Mr. Rogers and Ms. Maximoff both have the same reaction, which is they get steadily more uncomfortable the closer the spiders get. They will both leave the room if it becomes too much. They are also the ones mainly called upon to kill spiders for the others, even if it's visibly obvious they dislike touching the spiders. Tapping his pencil against the workshop table, he kept reading. Ms. Romanoff is much the same, except it only applies to larger spiders. She has no problem with smaller ones, from what I found out. Seeing Tony nod, Peter continued with the last of it. Mr. Vision and Mr. Barnes both have no reaction, though Peter gave a quick glance towards his mentor. He knew Tony had forgiven Mr. Barnes the most out of all the rogues, but he also didn't want to accidentally touch on a sore spot. Mr. Barnes has been known to pick up and touch some of the fake test spiders. He only does it towards the fuzzy ones. He also looked interested in the giant spiders that attached themselves to me that day in Brooklyn. That? Tony blinked, looking over at the teen. Most of that is actually surprising. The Black Widow is scared of spiders. Only large ones. Isn't that a bit too ironic? Peter snorted. Less ironic than if I was scared of them. At least she's not genetically half spider. The truth, Tony yells before calming down. Continue this hypothetical plan you have going on. He looked towards his mentor in trepidation. Why do you say it like that? Because we both know. No, you can't have that right now. I need it. This hypothetical plan is already in motion. You're just waiting for all the rogues and Vision to get back from wherever they all went for lunch, so you can watch. Crying for innocence and probably failing, Peter tries playing dumb. I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, you don't, do you? Tony narrows his eyes at the teen. Then if I asked Friday to pull up the camera feed, I wouldn't find the entire common room covered in spiders. No! Peter shouts, realizing too late that Tony was trying to rile him up on purpose. Grumbling, he angrily goes back to his homework, knowing he just gave himself away. Okay, so maybe I did already do that, but it's going to be great. I'm betting on Mr. Wilson fainting. Yeah? Tony smirks. I'll bet it'll be Hawkeye. Stakes? Final say on food and movie choices for the next 2 weeks. Oh, you're on. I hope you're prepared to lose, Dad. 2 weeks of the B movie. I don't think you can handle it. Only if I lose, kid, and I've never been known to lose. An hour later had Friday pulling up the security live feed, stating that the Rogues Plus Vision just arrived in the compound's garage. Both Peter and Tony pushed away what they were working on to gather around the videos. One of them showing the common room absolutely drenched in spiders of various sizes and colours. Jesus, kid, you really went all out. Go big or go home apparently runs in the family. Tony laughed, working to get himself under control once the garage feed showed everyone exiting the SUVs. They tracked the group through the compound, waiting with bated breath as they got closer and closer to the common room. Gasp echoed in the workshop, but neither knew who it came from as they watched Clint reach the door first. Oh shit. It was as if time slowed down as the two watched the group walk into the common room, a flicker of surprise and disappointment passing through them at the obliviousness of the rogues. Emotions that were quickly banished once screaming started coming through the speakers. Jesus fuck! Oh hell no! Please tell me this is a dream. Please tell me this is a dream. Please tell me this is a dream. Begone, spawn of Satan! Begone! Tears gathered in both of the geniuses' eyes, a few spilling down Tony's cheeks as they laughed at the reactions. Steve's terrified voice made them look back at the video through the blurriness. Bucky, no, don't bring that any closer. How are you okay with holding something like that? It's just a spider, a scared one at that. Well, most of these guys are probably scared, so if you could shut the fuck up, that would be great. Because standing in the middle of the room was Bucky, holding Peter's giant blue boom tarantula in his cupped hands. Kid, you might want to go get Eggplant. Rogers looks like he's ready to throw down with the spider. Still giggling, Peter agreed, and heading towards the exit of the workshop. The suit on. You're going to get swarmed by a bunch of freaked-out arachnids the second you step foot in there, so unless you want them all to know, put the damn suit on. Peter hadn't even thought of that. Spinning on his heel, he quickly dragged his suit out of his backpack and tossed it on before running towards the common room. Once he got there, he quietly jumped onto the ceiling and crawled through the door, everyone too freaked out by the sheer amount of creepy crawlies to notice. Seeing Steve creeping towards a growling, defensive Bucky had Peter moving quick. Eggplant! Dropping down in front of Bucky, he held his hands out. Immediately, purple-grey legs reached out for the spandex-covered hands, as dozens of tiny little legs crawled up Peter's legs. Purring softly, he brushed the colourful legs still covered protectively by Bucky's hands. Hey, little buddy, think you could hang out for a few seconds longer? Peter waved absent-mindedly as the spiders started to cover more and more of his body. Just let me get everyone else outside, then I can put you back in your little home, okay? Clicking, Peter moved towards the large floor-to-ceiling windows, guiding the small army of eight-legged creatures to the small hidden hatch Tony had put in specifically for Peter. Once he came back inside, Peter looked around only to see both Clint and Sam passed out on the floor. He frowned at the two downed men, even as he walked back to Bucky and the tarantula he was still holding. Damn, of course they both fainted. Now how do we decide who wins? If I may, Peter, came Karen's voice. Friday told me about the bet. Why don't you each get a week since you both technically won? Yeah, that would work, wouldn't it? Thanks, Karen. Any time, Peter. With that in mind, Peter stops in front of Bucky. Thanks for protecting Eggplant. Peter would have been so upset if anything had happened to him. His name's Eggplant. Not really expecting a reply, he startled at the softly accented words. Deciding to roll with it, he held his hands out for the tarantula, smiling under the mask when the ex-assassin gently passes the arachnid over. It's because Mr. Stark called him Fuzzy Plum one time, though Peter said the colouring reminded him more of an eggplant, hence the name. Peter felt slightly weird talking about himself in the third person, but he shrugged it off. Watching the super soldier nod at the explanation and the fondness in his eyes had Peter coming up with an idea that would probably bite him in the ass later on, but fuck it, you know? The line between helping people and imminent self-destruction was a fine one, and boy did Peter walk it hard. If you asked, Peter felt the lenses of his mask narrow. I bet Peter would let you hang out with Eggplant whenever you wanted. Mr. Stark would also let you if you asked. Seeing the ex-assassin open his mouth just to refuse, Peter shook his head. Just ask first before tossing the idea away completely. Jumping onto the ceiling after putting Eggplant on his head, Peter gave a parting farewell before crawling away. I have to go put this little guy back where he belongs, but think about it. 3 weeks later saw Bucky hesitantly asking Tony if he could see Peter's tarantula. If seeing the man become less stressed, less tense around the compound from the regular interaction, ended up with a giant black and silver fuzzy stuffed tarantula showing up on the man's bed. That was for Tony to know, and for Peter to snicker about. Surf's up. Peter peeked his head around the corner of the wall he was hiding behind. Bringing his phone to his mouth, he quietly spoke into the speaker. Friday, is there anyone near the staircase? It took a few seconds before there was a reply. Not at the moment, came the softly Irish accented voice. Boss is currently in the communal kitchen. That wasn't ideal, but it was also the best Peter was going to get. Sneaking down the hallway, he crouched behind a support beam as he scanned the lower level. He was right next to the staircase that led to the ground floor, and really didn't want someone to stop him now. You might want to hurry, mini-boss. Boss is finishing up the smoothies he's making as we wait. That got Peter into gear. Turning on the camera on his phone and setting it to video, he got into position in front of the staircase, easily jumping onto the railing, each foot on one railing in an easy stretch. He made sure he was comfortable. If this went wrong, then Peter knew he was going to be in a load of trouble. You ready to record, Friday? Always, mini-boss. Taking a deep breath, Peter hit the record button so that he could get a POV version while Friday captured the third-person video. Once he was sure that his phone was recording, Peter concentrated on letting the stickiness on his feet release. Once he felt himself starting to lose his grip, he braced himself. Soon enough, he started to slide down the railing, quickly gaining speed. As concentrated as he was on getting a good video and keeping his balance, he didn't see nor hear Tony come out of the kitchen and into the common room. He was 3/4 of the way down the railing when the sound of the man swearing and glass breaking caught his attention. What the fuck? It was enough for Peter to lose his balance, one foot slipping off the railing. Kicking himself into a ball, he felt himself hit the floor instead of the stairs and roll, coming to a stop in the middle of the common room in a sitting position. Well, shit. The horrified look on his mentor's face was not good. I can explain. Peter watched as his mentor's face went from horrified to outraged. Then you better start explaining right this instant, and it better be damn good too. Scrambling to his feet, Peter tried his best. So, like that stunt you sometimes see in movies or like at some form of party, where the person tries to show off by sitting on a stair railing and sliding down? At Tony's nod, he continued. Okay, well, I thought it would be cool to learn basically a more dramatic version of that, especially since the enhanced everything would help with actually doing it and with the eventuality that I would fall. Tony looked at him like he had hit his head and gone slightly insane, which he didn't. His head was perfectly fine, thank you. Peter knows how to tuck and roll, damn it. So you want to learn whatever hell version of a rail slide that you just attempted, all because it's dramatic? Tony put his face in his hands, voice becoming slightly muffled. Jesus Christ. I also wanted to scare people with it. Seeing Tony's head snap up on a glare, Peter hastily tacked on. Not you specifically, just like the rogues or even Rhodey. You just could be practicing for the first time is all. There was a long silence as the two just stared at each other. It was broken by Tony sighing as he scrubbed a hand over his face. Next time, just give me a heads up, all right? Okay. And if you get injured at all, you are to immediately go to medical. Friday will let me know if you don't. Tony glares at one of her cameras. Won't you, Friday? Of course, boss. Peter was bouncing on the balls of his feet in excitement. He's basically getting permission to scare all the other people at the compound. And lastly, the engineer held up a hand to stop the excited teen, stopping him from saying anything just yet. I want video, especially if you get around to freaking Rhodey out with that stunt. Nodding enthusiastically, Peter bounded over and wrapped the man in a hug, ignoring the spilled smoothies and broken glass. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Feeling a hand pat the top of his head and smooth out a few rogue curls had Peter even more giddy with happiness. Yeah, just try not to hurt yourself. The crunch of glass under their feet made Tony look down. You're also cleaning that up. I'll make some new smoothies. After that, Tony had short snippets of video sent to him via Friday for the next few weeks, each showing the reactions of the Rogue Avengers to Peter's increasingly dangerous rail stunts. The ones that got to Tony the most was the day he was sent 2 videos, one each from both Friday and Peter. Watching the one from Peter had Tony laughing so hard he thought he was going to be sick, the look of pure unadulterated panic on Rhodey's face setting him off. Once he opened Friday's video, he understood exactly why the man had looked like that, also feeling nervous even if he still thought it was hilarious. The video showed Peter sliding down the compound stairway railing, one hand holding his phone while the other held onto the railing itself. The rest of him was up in the air in a handstand as he zoomed down the slick metal surface. If Tony didn't know the kid was enhanced in a way that actually allowed that kind of behaviour, he would have wrapped the teen genius in about 1 million layers of bubble wrap and never let him out. It was only the knowledge that the kid had handled worse, even if the thought threatened to give Tony an aneurysm, that allowed him, in good conscience, to save the video right next to his other favourite. Because while Rhodey's reaction is his favourite, seeing the Winter Soldier run up and grab Peter just as he started to surf, he had a piece of cardboard as a board and everything, down the railing, had Tony giggling, actually giggling. It was nice to know that there were people who cared about Peter as much as Tony and Aunt May did, even if the kid didn't know it yet, judging by the confused look on his face in the video. And Tony 110% planned to use the resulting lecture that Bucky had given the poor teen against him. The kid's scandalised face as he was reprimanded would be the source of Tony's amusement for years. Build a castle, forever will reign. Peter watched his mentor from the workshop doors as he worked on another SI project, hunched over the workbench and shoulders tense. Tony had been like this for the past few weeks, tired, overworked, stressed beyond belief.
deadlines and paperwork for Stark Industries on top of upgrades and maintenance of not only on both the Iron Man and Spider-Man suits, but all the Rogue Avengers gear too, even if there were scientists and employees within the compound specifically for the Rogues' gear. Plus, Peter knows that Tony is still running circles for the Accords Council. The Rogues may be pardoned and General Ross locked away for life, but that doesn't mean there is any less to do. The dark circles under the man's eyes have reached an all-time high. Tony was putting Bucky's tactical sniper eye paint to shame. Not bothering to take off his backpack yet, the young mutant reaches for his phone to text Friday, not wanting to alert the other man to his presence just yet. Better to let him finish this one project before dragging him away. Friday, when's the last time Mr. Stark slept? Approximately 35.8 hours ago. Peter almost choked. Last time he ate? Half of a smoothie 3 hours ago. He spied the half-full glass on the table. He also knew what Friday wasn't telling him, her short replies showing how worried she is, that even when her creator sleeps it's not for long, and that he hasn't had anything substantial to eat for a while. Probably not since Peter had visited last weekend when he had been able to drag the engineer out to the compound for a couple of hours to get Mexican food at a newly opened restaurant. Biting his lip, he stared down at his now dark phone screen. A break was in order. Some form of mental health or treat yourself day. Even Aunt May took better care of herself while stressed than Tony did. Peter had once asked Friday to show him what a normal work week would look like for the engineer. The schedule that had shown up immediately had the teen hiding under his blanket for hours. From that day forward, his respect for the man had multiplied exponentially. But the main problem with getting Tony to take a day off was actually getting the man to take the day off. Nothing held his attention long enough for him to actually relax without picking up one of his tablets laying around the compound and doing some form of work on it. Which Peter understood. There's too much going on in the man's brain for him to relax completely, but Peter just wishes he would pick something more fun to distract himself with than whatever work he can do outside of the workshop. A text lighting up his phone brought Peter out of his thoughts. Hey, wanna see if you can come over this break? I got a new Lego set, 7,000 pieces of Millennium Falcon. That might actually work, actually. Ned, my bestest bro, my man in the chair, you've just helped me so much. Thank you so much, I love you. Also, not this weekend, but like sometime after school? 7,000 pieces. Ignoring the string of questions Ned was sending him, Peter switched back over to his chat with Friday, some semblance of an idea forming within the back of his mind. Does Mr. Stark have done enough work to take the weekend off? Boss has completed all projects for the week and half of next week. May I inquire what your plan is? Step 1. Sleep. I'll think through the West while he's sleeping. Pocketing the phone, he determinedly made his way across the room until he was standing next to his mentor. Mr. Stark? The sound of his voice had the engineer jolting upright with a yelp. Jesus, kid, you scared me. When'd you get here? What day is it? Thursday, April 13th, boss, was Friday's reply. Suspicious eyes locked onto Peter's. What are you doing here so early, kid? It's a long weekend, he explained. No school until next Tuesday. Understanding lit up Tony's eyes. Ah, I remember now. He turned towards Peter while setting down the tools he was using. You were excited about being able to test some new web ideas. Yeah, was Peter's excited response, before he remembered he was attempting to stage some form of intervention and subduing his expression. He shuffled where he stood, glancing shyly at the other man, trying to play up a nervous act. But can we maybe do something else first? A confused look came over Tony's face. Sure, what do you have in mind? Immediately dropping the act, he smiled brightly as he grasped Mr. Stark's arm. Come, I'll show you. Tugging on the arm he's holding, Peter manages to get the man standing, keeping him stable when he stumbles. They're out of the workshop doors and entering the hallway that held the West Wing bedrooms by the time Tony has enough sense to ask questions. "Pete, what are you planning exactly?" Peter looks Tony dead in the eye and solemnly says, "An intervention." He then ignores the spluttering behind him and continues to guide them to Tony's bedroom, using the tiniest amount of his super strength to make it easier. "An intervention? For what?" Pushing open the bedroom door, Peter drags the mechanic in and pushes him to sit on the bed, while tossing his backpack into a corner. Crossing his arms, he stares down at the flabbergasted genius. "For what? For you overworking yourself? So, you're going to get some sleep, then we're going to get some food before doing something fun instead of more work." When outrage overtook Tony's face, Peter knew he was walking a fine line. Still, he held his ground, refusing to let someone he thought of as a father to work himself into the ground like this. And wow, that was a hell of a thought. He ignored the slight panic that coursed through him at thinking about his mentor as a father figure, because now was definitely not the time to unpack all that. "Excuse me?" Tony's voice dark with simmering anger. "If I remember correctly, you're the teenage mentee in this relationship, and last I checked, that does not give you any right to order me around." Bright flashes of fear broke through Peter's determination at the tone of voice. "So if you'll excuse me," Tony pressed his hands to the bed in a move to stand, "I'm going back to work." Peter's first response was to move closer, blocking the other man from standing up and leaving. Fear was never something that had stopped him before. Why start now? He's just going to file this encounter away as a lapse in sanity brought on by a random surge of teenage rebellion, even if it is for a good cause. Mr. Stark glared. "Peter, move." "No." "What the hell do you mean no? Move, Peter. Now!" Feeling tears gather in his eyes, Peter clenched his hands in an attempt to stop his hands from shaking. He'd never liked getting in trouble, but if angry yelling was the price he had to pay to plant some common sense into the self-destructive man, then Peter would pay it over and over for as many times as it took. No. Something in either his expression or tone must have hit home for Tony, because suddenly the engineer didn't look quite as furious. He still looked angry, but concern was quickly taking over the remaining irritation. "No, I won't move. I'm not letting you go back down there just to work yourself to the point of passing out." A few tears slipped down Peter's cheeks, voice wavering but still firm. "Every time I've seen you these last few weeks, you've always looked worse. More tired, more stressed, never taking a break. Friday's worried along with the bots. I'm worried." Scrubbing at his eyes, he ignored the indignant "hey" at the appearance part. "I'm not going to stand around and watch you work yourself into an early grave. I can't lose another dad, especially like this. I refuse." By the end, Peter was sobbing. He also realised too late what he'd just said. Apparently now was the time to unpack all of that. Hands blocking his sight from where they were pressed into eyes, Peter didn't notice the shocked look on Tony's face melt into something much softer. "Oh, Peter." The soft grip on his wrist pulled one of Peter's hands away from his face, the other following shortly. Peter watched through blurry vision as Tony reached up and swiped the falling tears away with calloused fingers. Soon enough, Peter found himself being pulled into a hug, one hand running soothingly down his back, while the other scratched softly in between his curls. "I'm sorry, Peter," Tony whispered. "I didn't realise I was worrying you this much." Peter's only response was to tuck his face further into his mentor's neck, hands gripping the back of a grease-stained t-shirt. They stayed like this for a few long minutes before Peter felt the older man try and pull away. Whimpering, he held on tighter. Only when Tony stopped pulling him back did Peter relax once more. Fingers tugged at the ends of his hair. "You gotta let go, Pete." Soft whines escaped Peter's throat at the idea. "Just for a little bit, okay? I really don't want to sleep in dirty clothes." It took a few more seconds before Peter loosened his grip enough to be pulled back so that he was face to face with Tony. Give me like 2 minutes, 5 tops. Then how about we both take a nap? Mahogany eyes scanned Peter. You look like you could use one as much as me right now. Only when after Peter nodded and removed his hold did Tony actually move, pushing the teen to sit fully on the bed before grabbing some clean clothes. He tossed a soft pair of sweatpants onto Peter's lap as he headed into the bathroom to change. I'll be right back, he called just as the bathroom door shut quietly. Everything felt numb even as Peter went through the motions of changing his jeans for the sweatpants. Crawling further onto the bed, he collapsed onto the pillows, dragging one down to hug against his chest. Crying was such a drain. Soft footsteps and the bed dipped, alerted Peter to Tony's return. See? Not that long. 163 seconds. Peter could feel the confused gaze directed at him. A calloused hand in his hair had him rolling over so he was closer to his mentor, forehead now pressed against the man's thigh. You were gone 163 seconds. Ah. The leg Peter was leaning against shifted before suddenly the blankets he was laying on were pulled from under him. He squeaked as he was dragged a few inches down the bed. Laughter from above him had Peter turning around with a glare. Tony just patted the sheets next to him. Come on, kid. You nap, I'll sleep for probably far longer than you, and then we can deal with shit next time we're both awake. Blankets were dragged up over Peter, and as soon as his head hit a pillow, a hand moving back to run through his hair, lightly scratching in places. Warmth started to flush the numb feeling from his body. Sleep quickly followed, gentle hands and soft whispered reassurances sending him to sleep fairly easily. Hours later, Peter awoke to swollen puffy eyes and the feeling of being trapped. A moment of panic had him squirming against what was encasing him, until he realised it was just the bed sheet. God, Peter hated sheets. They either ended up disappearing off the bed or trying to kill him like the one wrapped around him is now. Sheets are nothing more than cloth snakes waiting for the right time to strike. Trying to open his eyes, he was rudely reminded about the crying he'd done before falling asleep, by how they stuck together and felt fairly sore. Whoever thought it was funny to make him such a weepy human being had better be ready, because Peter was ready to throw hands. Expending the little energy Peter had regained to untangle himself from the devil's silk snare, he not so gracefully made his way to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. Finding a washcloth in one of the cabinets, and sending the still sleeping engineer a silent apology for going through his stuff, he soaked it in the same cold water before laying down on the floor and covering his eyes with it. His voice was raspy, throat feeling like sandpaper. Friday, how long was I asleep? About 4 hours was Friday's reply, voice calm and soothing to Peter's still tired brain. He held up the OK symbol with his fingers before going back to laying in silence, dozing on and off. It was only when the washcloth had lost its chill did Peter decide he should actually get up. So, hiding the washcloth under a layer of clothes in the bathroom's hamper, he peeked his head out of the door. Mr. Stark could barely be seen under the multiple layers of blankets, but the steady heartbeat that Peter could hear told him that the other man was still sound asleep. Sighing quietly, Peter tiptoed back towards his previously forgotten backpack, snagging it from its place in the corner before turning back to the bed, carefully climbing back on and getting comfortable. He really didn't want to go out to the rest of the compound, where there was a chance of meeting someone, and then that someone wanting to talk. Peter really just did not feel up to any conversations at the moment. Pulling his backpack closer, he dumped everything out of it, freezing when Tony moved in his sleep from the other side of the bed. Once the other man was settled and the room quiet again, Peter sorted through the mess of papers and got started on the homework he found. Because what better excuse for avoiding people than homework? He has yet to meet an adult to scold him for doing homework, making it basically a foolproof plan. So, Peter spent the next couple of hours mindlessly working through his assignments, letting equations soothe his emotionally drained brain. It was only after every question was filled out did he come up for air, finally noticing that he'd taken over one entire side of the frankly massive bed, with papers, books, and various writing utensils that he had zero recollection of owning. No, really, he had no idea he even owned this many pencils. Where did they come from, and, more importantly, where the hell were they last week when he was struggling to find even one for his physics exam? Peter glares at his collection of newly found pencils before giving up, deciding to contemplate the idea that his backpack might actually be a pocket-sized black hole later, and shuffling through the vaguely organised mess of papers for his notebook of graph paper. Also finding his phone under a pillow and dangerously close to falling off the bed, he unlocks it in order to do a little research. He did tell Friday, after all, that he was going to work on the rest of his little intervention plan once he had gotten the stubborn engineer to sleep. Though, the plan wasn't looking so little as Peter scrolled through dozens of images, searching for one to use as a reference. 20 minutes later, and what seemed like 100 different searches later, because Peter refused to go further than page 1 or the initial photo results. He's staging an intervention, not desperate. He finally settled on a photo that looked challenging but fun. Flipping to an empty page in his notebook, he started sketching a rough outline, jotting down notes along different parts of the drawing. Halfway through, Peter pauses. "Friday," he whispers. "Can you buy Legos in bulk?" "Sure can, mini-boss, by the pound," was the reply, loud enough for Peter's enhanced hearing to pick up, and quiet enough that, even had Tony been awake, the sleeping man wouldn't have picked it up. "How much does a pound usually cost?" At the lack of an immediate response, Peter figures she must be searching for the answer. In the meantime, he goes back to idly sketching, more to give his hands something to do than anything else as he waits. "Within private resale sites, the price seems to be 5 to 10 USD per pound, comes Friday's eventual reply. Though, her voice turns more mellow. "Knowing Boss, that will not be the preferred purchase method." Sighing, Peter just nods. He already figured Tony would probably buy them all new, and that's only if he agrees to this whole thing in the first place. "That means it's also go big or go home, huh?" Peter asks, twisting his mechanical pencil in his hair. "But of course," was the cheerful reply. Shaking his head in exasperated fondness at his mentor's predictability, he winces as his hair is pulled from where it's now tangled around the pencil. He then spends the next 5 minutes struggling to remove the plastic stick from hell from his curls. Once he achieved freedom, Peter rubs the sore spot on his scalp and gets back to sketching, blocking out everything else but the designs being put to paper. He's filled 6 different pages with various ideas by the time movement to his right drags his attention away from what he's doing. Looking over, he notices the signs of Tony waking up. Peter watches apprehensively as his mentor's eyes open and meet his own. Not realising he had been holding his breath, Peter promptly chokes on it when the first words out of Tony's mouth are, "So, Dad, huh?" Because of course those had to be the man's first words right after waking up. Peter had honestly forgotten that little slip-up within the last handful of hours between now and then, having been a little distracted at the time. At least he was highly focused now. Suddenly there's a hand on his back, rubbing along his spine in a calming movement. Words filter back into focus as Peter stops coughing and gets his breathing more under control. "Relax, kid, just breathe. In and out, just like that. There you go." Finally, not feeling like he's going to lose a lung or two, Peter looks back up and finds Tony sitting up with a stiff smile on his face. "Damn, kid, if I'd have known that would have been the reaction, I wouldn't have brought it up again." That was not what Peter wanted. Sure, he was highly unprepared for such blunt reminder, but that didn't make it any less true. Maybe Peter didn't give it a lot of thought. Okay, any thought. But it didn't take the teen more than a few seconds to realise that, yeah, he thought of Tony as a father figure. Peter could roll with that. Now, the thought of Tony's reaction and the necessary talk that goes along with the engineer knowing, Peter could already feel his breath picking up again. Hands on his cheeks forced his face upwards, confusing Peter as to when he'd looked away, but not slowing his ragged breathing. Breathe. The word was spoken like a demand, hard and commanding. It registered sharply in Peter's mind, shocking him enough that he pulled in a deep breath unconsciously. Good. Now out. Peter let himself breathe out shakily. Again. He instinctively did it again, some part of his brain understanding that it was Tony giving these commands, that he'd never heard this particular tone before, but another part was just happy to have something to listen to and follow. Maybe that spider bite messed with more of Peter's instincts than he thought, because already he felt himself calming down for the second time in 10 minutes. It was the easiest he's ever come down from a panic attack. He'd have to remember the instinct thing and bring it up later, run some tests. The second he was breathing more evenly did Peter start rambling. Okay, so yes, I did call you Dad at the time, and it may have been an accident to call you Dad. Peter missed the flash of hurt that crossed Tony's face. And maybe I've been a little too busy to fully think everything through. Waving the notebook towards the mess of papers and books, Peter continues. But, even without major thought, I know that it feels right. Something just seemed to click. Like that I've probably thought in the back of my mind of you as a father figure for a while, but I was really just late in noticing it. Peter refuses to look the older man in the eye, instead flicking his gaze nervously everywhere but in Tony's direction. But I also understand if you don't want me to call you that. I mean, I get it if you just want it to be a mentor. Being an intern in the new suit really is enough. Hell, probably more than what I deserve. So if you don't want me to call you... A hand over his mouth cut Peter off. For the love of God, kid, just for once, shut up. Tony sighed, so overly fond of the teen, if not highly concerned about the kid's lack of self-worth. You sound like an idiot. Glaring, Peter licks the hand still laying against his mouth. Tony just raises his eyebrows at the action, not moving his hand. Really? That's the plan you went with? Feeling another lick has Tony rolling his eyes before relenting, wiping his saliva-coated hand against Peter's shirt to clean it off, ignoring the indignant "Hey!" that went along with the action. Listen, kid, I really don't mind if you call me Dad. Hope budded in Peter's chest. Honestly, Peter, I don't mind. I'm flattered. Tony gives the kid a small smile. Hearing you even say the word Dad in relation to me makes me feel happy in a way that I've never felt before. Peter threw himself at the engineer, squeezing the other in a massive hug as they fell back against the bed from force. Tony laughed even as he wrapped his arms around his kid. All right, you don't have to strangle me. Giving Tony one last good squeeze, Peter slowly sat back up, crumpling papers before he moved them back out of the way. The sound caught Tony's attention, eye immediately drawn to the open notebook that was closest to him. What is this? Yelping, Peter reaches for the notebook, only to have pulled away. It's not done yet, he cries. Ignoring the teen, Tony just looks over at the sketch, flipping through some pages and reading the notes that adorn the rest of the sketches. Is this part of that intervention you are planning? Grumbling, Peter nodded. It's the second part. Nodding, Tony picks up a spare pencil, steadily ignoring the catastrophe that has taken over his bed, and starts marking his own notes to the pages, pausing as he catches sight of one whole page filled with nothing but equations. Scanning the numbers, Tony furrows his brows. What kind of crazy math do you have going on here, kid? None of this makes sense. Ah, Peter perks up, crawling to look over the top of the notebook. It's for the amount of Legos needed to build a castle this size. I kept getting confused on what size Lego would work best in different areas. That's probably why none of it makes sense. The teen scratches at the back of his neck. I got most of the design drawn up, but figuring out the best way to actually build something like this was making my head spin. Tony snorted. Maybe it's a good thing you got an engineer for a dad then, I guess. Groaning, Peter buries his face in his hands. That's going to take getting used to. For you and me both, kid, Tony agrees. But how about we head down to the workshop, or at least find a tablet, so Friday can throw these designs into some holograms and we can work on them easier. Just as Peter is opening his mouth to decline, remembering the part of his plan where he gets Tony to eat, his stomach rumbles loudly in protest. Both geniuses blink at each other in surprise, one going red in embarrassment while the other smirks. Or how about we go get something to eat? We could really use some food. Nodding rapidly in agreement, Peter slides off the bed and starts gathering his scattered homework, shoving it in his backpack with little regard if it got wrinkled or not. One meal later, where Peter basically ended up cleaning out the communal fridge's leftovers, as Tony watched on from where he was protecting the one box he had snagged, both Peter and Tony ended up back in the workshop, now sated and well rested. Holograms floated above one of the tables as both geniuses worked on finishing the building schematics. "Okay, but where are we going to put this?" Peter asks as he adds a slide to the outside of the castle. "This thing is going to be massive, because you won't let me size it down. I know I started this as a treat-yourself project, but it's going to take months to build with the design we have right now." Instead of Tony, it was Friday who replied. "There's an empty lab area within the employee section of the compound with enough space to hold the project at its current dimensions." Tony smirked at the kid. "You heard the lady. We'll just make that the designated Lego room from now on. Besides," the engineer typed a few numbers into the equation he was working on, "if we open this up to the rest of the people in the compound, then it should be done in roughly 3 months. "Compound-wide collaboration," Peter shouts, throwing his hands in the air, excited. "Do you think if the employees like it here, we can add a Lego room to the tower as well?" "Sure, kid. I'll throw one in every Stark Industries office if this one, and later the tower one, goes well." "Yes!" Peter fist bumps the air, wiggling in the chair in delight. Tony chuckles at the display. Okay, settle down. Nothing is happening until we see how this one goes. You done with your portion?" he asks. Adding some final touches, Peter gives a flick of his fingers and sends the holograms he was working on towards Tony. A couple minutes of staring and a few calculations later, Tony nods and gives the go-ahead. "Looks good. I'll have Friday order enough pieces for the bottom portion to begin with, and then we'll go from there. They should be here probably Sunday, right, Fry?" "That's correct, boss." "Awesome." Peter looked like he was going to vibrate out of his skin as he sat on the workshop stool, bouncing in his seat. Tony gave the excited teen a once-over before standing. "Well, since we got some time to kill," he grinned mischievously at the young mutant, walking towards the door. "How about I kick your ass at some Smash Bros until it's time for dinner?" Eyes widening, Peter jumps off the stool and bolts for the exit, throwing over his shoulder gleefully, "I want to see you try, old man." "You disrespectful little brat," Tony sprints off after the teen. "Get back here." A day and a half later and Sunday morning rolls around, bringing forth an alarming amount of boxes being set outside the compound's employee entrance, and 2 groggy geniuses, both of whom look at the delivery before silently agreeing that they were not moving them right at this moment. Instead, Tony signed off on the delivery before dragging the teen back into the Avengers section of the compound and into the kitchen. Basically, one buffet of breakfast food with an entire bottle of juice for Peter, and a much, much smaller amount of food with coffee. So much coffee it's probably unhealthy, but what's life without a little danger and some high-key jitters? For Tony. And they finally felt awake enough to tackle the mess they left outside. Slowly but surely, hauling the boxes into the empty lab Friday had quarantined for them, made Peter extremely glad he had super strength. It went a lot faster when he could carry as many boxes as possible, never minding doors. Thank God for Friday and automatic doors she could open at will. It also helped that the other employees already at work were in other parts of the compound and not the route Tony and Peter were taking. Even so, he still collapses onto the lab floor, groaning dramatically, after setting the last of the boxes down. Tony's head blocks the overhead lights as he looks down at the teen. "Too much for the spiderling? Do you need a nap?" Rolling onto his stomach, Peter buries his face in his arms. "Yeah, I'm gonna take a nap right here." A foot poking his side has Peter swatting half-heartedly at the offensive limb. "Stop!" he whines. A snort comes from above him. "Oh please, you're not even winded, much less tired after that. I should know, I took the scans on your mutation myself." That got Peter to roll back over and look up at his mentor. "I thought Friday took those." Tony shrugs. "She did, but I analysed them." "Huh." Rolling his eyes, Tony holds a hand out. Now get up, let's get this show on the road. Peter grabbed the outstretched hand, allowing himself to be pulled to his feet, grinning widely. It took a few days after the initial start of the project for some of the others in the compound to find out, eventually getting curious enough to visit the lab and poke around. But it soon became normal to see tired and stressed, or both, workers going in and out of the Lego lab. It seemed to help allow them to relax, some even rushing out in a hurry because the solution to their problems suddenly appeared. And if Tony also found the menial task of locking block after block of Legos together relaxing, well, no one had to know. Except maybe Peter. Tony had to give credit where credit was due. The kid had basically performed miracles in improving Tony's mental and physical health, even if he didn't realise exactly how much. So yeah, maybe sectioning off a piece of the compound to build some Lego monstrosity had been a good idea. Also true to Tony's estimate, once the rest of the compound, minus the rogues, even if Tony wasn't quite sure how they never found out, considering all the gossip and traffic the lab got, started working together, it was only 3 months until everything was basically finished. Therefore, he was prepared when a group of his employees caught him as he was exiting his car, just having got back from personally picking Peter up after school, because there were rumours going around on how him and Peter had to be the ones to add the final piece, since it was technically their project. And unlike some, Tony makes it a habit to know the rumours circulating in the place he lives and works. Peter was a little less prepared though, giving a squeak as both geniuses were surrounded and dragged away. And as much as Tony pretended to fight at first, he was mostly silent as he followed along to the lab, listening to Peter happily chatter with the employees. Climbing to the top of their little project, excited talk became hushed whispers as Peter and Tony grabbed the last 2 Lego pieces. Cheering rose from the ground as the pieces slotted into the place, but they faded to the background as Tony took in the pure joy that Peter's smile held. Reaching over, he ran his fingers through the teen's curls, pride filling every crevice of his body. "You did good, Pete." Peter met his mentor's eyes, smile falling into something a little more soft, but no less real. "Thanks, Dad." And if a framed photo of the moment, of the 2 of them standing on top of a large indoor Lego castle, Tony's hand in Peter's hair, and warm smiles on both their faces, was delivered later that week to Tony's office by a shy employee, who was Tony if not a proud father, saving a copy before displaying the photograph on his desk. When a father gives to his son, both laugh. When a son gives to his father, both cry. William Shakespeare. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podfic. If you do, please consider subscribing as I try to upload at least twice a week. It really makes my day. I'm taking requests, so if you have a favourite fic you would like covered, drop me a comment and I will reach out to the author for you, and I will credit you for the suggestion in the description. Have a lovely day.